This is Brent Miller with HED Architects and Engineers. You're listening to EdUp Accelerated Excellence.
The EdUp Accelerated Excellence podcast is supported by the 2.0 conferences to be held in Las Vegas, April 7th through 9th, 2026. Business leaders, educators, healthcare experts, marketing and tech professionals, and founding entrepreneurs are welcome to take part. Reserve your space today and receive a 15% discount courtesy of EdUp Accelerated Excellence with the code EDUPXE15OFF. That's EDUPXE15 off. Learn more and register online at the2conf.com. That's the2conf.com with the code EDUPXE15OFF.
Welcome to EdUp Accelerated Excellence, the podcast for the advancement of educational excellence and equity. I am your host, Jacob Easley II, PhD, PMP, and we have a guest today that I'm very excited about because we're developing a two-part series. This is the first of those two episodes on the impact of international baccalaureate in the field of education. And today we have with us Robert Kelty, who is Head of Research, Government Relations, and Development at International Baccalaureate. Robert, that's a long title. I'm sure that means that you're completely always busy. Would you please give voice to your name and introduce yourself to the EdUp Accelerated Excellence community?
Thank you, Jacob. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on the show. My name is Robert Kelty. I am the head of development and outreach and government relations for IB North America, which is comprised of the United States and Canada.
Wonderful. So we're going to get right into this to learn more about IB. Can you just give us a simple dictionary definition on what IB is to orientate us today for our conversation?
Absolutely. The International Baccalaureate is a nonprofit foundation that was started in 1968. Was comprised of a network of international schools and since has blossomed into a program that has reached over 160 countries, over 6,000 schools around the world. Here in the U.S., we have over 2,500 programs in the U.S. What makes the IB really special in the context of IB North America is that most of our programs are public. 90% of IB schools in the US are public, 80% of IB programs in Canada are public. And when you look at who we're serving in that public sector, between 60 and 75% of IB schools across the United States qualify for federal Title I funds. So serving communities in poverty. And I think the reason for that is pretty special. It's because you have principals and superintendents out there that want to bring a world-class education to all students. So it's a uniquely American IB story here in the U.S., and we're very proud of those statistics.
Wonderful. So you said North America, your work in North America is centralized around the U.S., the 50 states, or do you also include Canada?
We do include Canada. We're in 48 of the 50 states here in the U.S. and across all 13 provinces in Canada.
Oh, wonderful. Brilliant. So we're not a political show, but we know that there is this bill of reconciliation that has passed the House. I'm actually in D.C. for some legislative work this week, so that's what's on my mind. Waiting to see how it fares in the Senate. And one of the concerns is restructuring of federal aid. So I know that's going to be very important for your IB principals and the IB networks, given that a majority of your schools are public. And as you mentioned, they do serve a diverse community, but largely providing access to those who, through federal aid, who often most likely would not have access to such high quality education through IB. So thank you for your work. So I want to talk about this idea of cultivating peace builders. So you wrote an article, Cultivating Peace Builders Through International Education, and you talked about empathy, critical thinking, social responsibility as the beacons. So how did you come to this concept of cultivating peacemakers, and how would you see those traits being taught today in schools, whether they're overlooked in traditional schools, but they're definitely highlighted in the IB experience? So how did you come to this idea, and how does it look? What does it look like?
Starting with the history of the IB, Jacob, I have always found it inspiring. And I say this through the lens of being a practitioner, right? I've been an educator, I've been a principal, I've been a superintendent, I've been a county superintendent. And when I look at the history of the IB, it really starts way back in 1924 at the International School of Geneva. And it was a reaction to World War I, where this group of educators, that's where the IB was founded by educators. And what they were looking to do was to create the space to reduce the extreme nationalism that led to that First World War. And then another historical document for the IB that's really a part of our DNA was the principal, the head of school of the International School of Geneva, gave a speech to UNESCO. And it's a remarkable speech. It's called Education Techniques for Peace, Do They Exist? And that speech is in our DNA. And that speech was in 1948, right after World War II. And the International School of Geneva was the only international school to survive the ravages of the Second World War. And so when we talk about education for a better world from the lens of the IB, it's authentic. It's in our DNA. And how we create the conditions for that, the techniques for that, right, is creating that space for empathy. Can we listen? Can we cross lines of difference and hear different perspectives? In terms of critical thinking, can we see ourselves as real problem solvers, as positive agents in the world? And when it comes to social responsibility, I'm really looking at that through the lens of what I'm seeing from our IB students here in the US. It's civics, right? It's, again, of our American DNA. And where I'm often humbled, Jacob, is in this role, I get to travel a lot. And when I'm in the Netherlands or I'm in France, World War II always comes up, whether it's the concierge, where it's the taxi driver, and they're always talking about how much appreciation they have for Americans and for America and our contribution in the Second World War. And so when I think, it's fascinating, right? And so when I think about those three skills, empathy, critical thinking, social responsibility, I really see those as 21st century skills, but also in the DNA of the IB.
Right. That is very fascinating that as you interface with our colleagues in the international community, that they talk about their reverence for the contributions of the U.S. in overcoming the issues of World War II. So
yeah,
I appreciate that, because that's enlightening for me. But you mentioned particularly in France, so I think that in France definitely holds up a specific space for that level of reverence.
Yeah.
And I think, as you mentioned, the social studies, how certain parts of the world continue to highlight some of the horrors or tragedies of the past in order to inform peace in the current context and going forward.
Yeah.
And I will say, though, having worked closely with a lot of schools in the U.S., traditional schools, social studies is somewhat slipping in terms of a priority. We're focusing on reading and math. And I think now folks are talking about AI, but science is still, I think, is not at the forefront, because those are the things that are tested, unfortunately. So thank you for the work that you guys are doing at IB. So how do we shift the public narrative from viewing international education as a luxury? And I have to be honest, I've taught school, and I remember, and I've taught foreign language, and I've taught ESL, and I've taught gifted. But in public schools, often we see IB as sort of an elite environment. So how do we shift that narrative from viewing IB as a luxury to seeing it as an essential to national and global progress?
The reason why I sincerely appreciate that question, Jacob, right, is the IB in some of the most historied elite schools around the world? The answer is yes. I mean, when you look at the legacy of the United World Colleges, right, of the International School of Geneva's, like these are amazing beacons of learning, right?
Right.
But at the same time, when you look at, if I'm going to a United World College independent school, or if I'm going to Edgewood High School outside Baltimore here in the US, right? I'll share with you why they're top of mind for me right now. It's still the same IB, whether you're in a private independent school or if you're in a public school. And why Edgewood is just top of mind for me right now, I saw this headline a couple days ago and it just blew me away. And it was, you know, in the IB world, it was just another day in the IB. But for me, thinking about, you know, my journey in education and how I've seen these principals and superintendents leverage the IB to bring this world-class education to their kiddos. The headline read, is from the Baltimore Sun, that the IB program at Edgewood High School had $21 million in scholarship offers for their students. $21 million. That's $469,000 each for each student. So $500,000, $500,000 in scholarship offers.
Right.
And that to me was, it was validating through the lens of, I know the quality, the educational experience that those kiddos got, but now the opportunities that are in front of them. And we're also talking like a kitchen economics.
Right.
Now, right? Because it's so expensive to get into college. And so to see that headline just really validated again, like the value of the IB for me as a practitioner, right? It's great pedagogically because it focuses on inquiry, it focuses on agency, but it's also, it opens doors for kids across the US and across the globe. And that's pretty special.
Yeah, that definitely is special. So let's back up a bit. So you mentioned at the top of the show that you've been a teacher, you've been a superintendent, you mentioned being a district superintendent.
Yeah.
I think you've also been an elected official.
I have, yeah. Coconino County Superintendent of Schools, that's right.
Okay, so what drew you to IB? How did you get here?
Yeah, and that goes back to the lecturing question, right? It really does for me because, you know, when we brought the IB to our community in Northern Arizona and Coconino County, right? We had a lot of the questions that you were bringing up. It's like, could our students do it? Could they meet the rigors of it? And to me, that answer was always like, why would we not think that a child that is coming from poverty or a child that is coming from, because in this case, my school was a trilingual school. Shout out to Puente Hojo Elementary. It is just a beautiful jewel in the education ecosystem. It's a Navajo immersion program and a Spanish-English bilingual program. So it's a trilingual school. And our pushback was every one of our kiddos knows how to ask a question. Every one of our kiddos bring in curiosity and background knowledge. And every kid wants to feel like they can do something with their learnings. And that's where we said, this shouldn't just be a luxury. This should be for all of our kids. And, you know, credit to just this amazing team of visionaries that I was working with, we created a K-12 IB pipeline throughout the district. And that was specifically connected to language immersion. So in terms of what drew me to the IB individually, outside of like wanting to give that opportunity that we just talked about for those kiddos outside Baltimore to, you know, to our kiddos in Northern Arizona, was really this notion of never having experienced an inquiry-based teaching and learning model myself. And I went to a very traditional orientation in terms of education. Our school was highly recognized for how we served indigenous communities, right? But once I saw like what an inquiry-based teaching and learning model looks like, I felt like this shift happened in me as an individual. 20 years in the field, right? All about educational equity. Came in with Teach for America, right? We're gonna one day every child, right? Like that was in our bones. But I'd never seen how empowered kids are when they're learning how to learn. And they're being taught how to research the problems they want to solve. And then they're being empowered to go out and do something about the problems they want to solve. It's just a completely different orientation of teaching and learning. And once I saw it, I couldn't go back. It was, this is what every child deserves. They should feel like the education they're getting in that school building, they can walk out of that school and go do something positive.
Yeah, you're building social agency through inquiry.
Yes.
Students, and can you imagine that? That's quite powerful to enter the classroom with the expectation that you have a question in mind to, at some point, you may not have it fully formulated, but the idea is that you yourself or you and your colleagues are going to contribute to society in some way by the end of this grading period or by the end of your academic experience, so on and so forth. So I think that sets a different tone for a sense of agency even coming into the educative space.
And to that point, Jacob, there's another school that I just have to highlight as an exemplar, Pacific Beach Middle School out in San Diego. Like, I would encourage anyone who's listening to this podcast to find a way to visit this school. Their program coordinator is phenomenal. Their student experiences and agency is next level. And I'll just share one example that it was a headline that caught my eye. And then I reached out to the school to learn more. And then I went to go visit. And I was just like, wow, like every school should be like this. And these two young ladies, and if they're listening to this or ever hear of it, you still just continue to humble me. But these two young ladies, for their community project, which is our big agency project in the middle years program, right? Because we have 4 programs: the primary, the middle, the diploma, and the career related. This was a middle years program, community projects, their agency-based project. They go out there, San Diego, and they collect over 3,000 signatures to change the name of a local park that didn't have a name. It was called like Joint Use Field or something like that.
Right.
3,000 signatures. And what did they want to change the name of the park to? They wanted to honor African-American educators that integrated San Diego public schools in the 1940s. And Jacob, they did it. They got the city and the school district behind them in this effort. And as a part of their official schooling, they successfully changed the name of a local park. And that to me is an example. That's every child should have an experience like that, where they can say, I did something, and I did it with my school behind me and with my teachers behind me supporting the whole way. That's the IB, in my opinion, and just a credit to the leadership team over there at Pacific Beach, because every kid gets that type of experience and that type of empowerment.
Yeah, I can see the smiles on their face after having success and being able to, first to engage so many community members and elected officials, but also to now see the manifestation of their inquiry project, having the name of the park changed in honor of the historical elders or leaders within their community. So that's wonderful.
A great example, yeah.
Thank you for listening to EdUp Accelerated Excellence. This episode is supported by the 2.0 conferences to be held in Las Vegas, Nevada, USA, April 7th through 9th, 2026. Business leaders, educators, healthcare experts, marketing and tech professionals, and founding entrepreneurs are welcome to take part. Reserve your space today and receive a 15% discount courtesy of EdUp Accelerated Excellence with the code EDUPXE15OFF. That's EdUPXE15OFF. Check out the details in the show notes or learn more and register online at the2conf.com. That's the2conf.com with the code EDUPXE15OFF.
So we're speaking with Robert Kelty, who is Head of Outreach, Government Relations, and Development at International Baccalaureate. And Robert, you've worked alongside indigenous nations. You talked about your work in Arizona, and advocated for Native education. What lessons can national and international education systems learn from indigenous ways of knowing and teaching?
Everything. Being a Jacob, I mean, Crown Point, New Mexico changed my life. Right. I got in this game back in 2001. So, I mean, almost 24 years ago now, right? Like I'm starting to get a lot of white in this beard, and it's been ed equity for 24 years. Right.
Yeah.
And it all came from what I learned and experienced in Crown Point, New Mexico. And so, to answer your question, though, in terms of what we can learn, language and culture is critically important. Right. The IB just partnered with Navajo Preparatory School, which is the official preparatory school of the Navajo Nation. Just landmark, iconic school. And we partnered with them because we have now included Navajo as a part of the official suite of the languages at the IB. So it's our first indigenous language that we've adopted in our suite of languages. Kiddos are now no longer going to have to choose between learning their mother tongue and becoming fluent in Navajo and or choosing the IB. Now they can do both. And I'm incredibly proud of the IB in that regard. We're hoping to add more indigenous languages in the future. What an honor to work with an iconic school like Navajo Preparatory School. Their head of school, Shauna Vicente, her team, they're just phenomenal advocates for their kiddos. And so I would just say, one, culture and language to many of our indigenous tribes and peoples is fundamental. There's an elder who, graced my life, and she said this quote, and I'll never forget it. Language is life, like food, like water. Language is life. And that has stuck with me till this day to just show just how important it is for us to be inclusive of that for many of our Native American and indigenous schools. I think other lessons is just resiliency and connectivity, right? I mean, so many of our, here in the U.S., Native American tribes and peoples, they serve our military so proudly because this is their homeland. That's, it's just all these lessons of resiliency and connectivity just continue to stay with me. And, I hope I make them proud every single day going forward in this role that's more international now. But I would say we all can learn a tremendous deal if we would just listen to many of our Native American voices.
That's wonderful. I'm sure you will continue to make them proud. And I really like the idea of language is life, particularly coming from a language background. And I had to say, as you were talking about the multiple languages or recognizing them, that was probably when I was a young teacher, what I knew about IB was specifically this idea of, in my mind, it was a language school.
That's right.
And so I think when you say that question earlier about being elite, that's probably where that stemmed from, because, we are a monolingual culture and now federally recognized English is the official language of the U.S., but that doesn't preclude us from understanding the worldviews of others. But this idea of language is the vehicle for how we create community, how we connect with one another. I mean, there's food and there's music and there's all the kind of things, how we worship, but we often communicate that through some form of language.
Right.
Whether it's audible language or other types of languages. So I think that's really powerful, and it's going to stick with me.
Yeah, and to your point, Jacob, like that goes back to that speech from Marie Theresa Moret in that, educational techniques for peace. That was one of the techniques that she suggested, was bilingualism and multilingualism as a means of learning how to cross lines of difference and understand different cultural ways of seeing the world. And to this day, I mean, as I continue to try to, refine my Spanish, right, and definitely living out on the Navajo Nation and learning how words would translate, I agree with her. I think when we become bilingual or multilingual, we literally see the world differently. I think our brains actually open up in a way and see the world differently.
That is true, actually. I can attest to that, particularly when you begin to dream in another language.
Right. Yeah. And that's what's so, again, special about the IB is that's in our DNA from our primary years program all the way to our career-related program, right? Is this notion of having a second language so you can engage in the world, whether that be through a business lens, whether that be through the lens of a, social responsibility lens. We have bilingualism and sometimes even more than one language, right? From the age of 5 all the way to graduation.
And that helps in that world of peacekeeping.
It does.
So your portfolio is quite vast, but and so are the multiple wonderful programs at IB. So one of the programs is Creativity, Activity, Service, CAS, contributing to the development of real-world change makers. Any standout examples that come to mind? Can you describe that for us and give us a 1 or 2 examples of what this program means?
Yeah, I can give you 4 because each one of our programs has a component like this. So for the primary years program, you have what we call the exhibition project, where typically 5th graders take between 2 and 6 weeks. They're researching a problem that they're passionate about. They're presenting what the solutions are, and hopefully they're volunteering time and actually doing something about it. And I can give a real world example actually from my son. The middle years program has a community project, which we talked about earlier. The diploma program has CAS, just like you described, Creativity, Action, and Service. And the career-related program has the Reflective Project, which is where our CP students, our career-related program students, reflect on an ethical issue and research an ethical issue within their field of study. So that can be, if I'm studying advanced farming in the Southwest, looking at the ethical issues of pulling water from the Colorado River. And then they're writing either a 3,000-word essay, so a mini thesis, if you will, and or a 1,500-word essay with a visual component around what they've learned. So all of our programs have that type of, action orientation, if you will, right, in service learning. As another example, in addition to the one we talked about from those 2 phenomenal young ladies, was a mini exhibition project for my son, where in his second language, actually, he was doing this research in Spanish. My son, Jacob, is, first of all, like, he's a pain in the bear, right? He is a gentle, just big force in the world. And he just, he makes the world a brighter place. And he is a very passionate fisherman, an angler, and absolutely passionate about water in general. And so his mini exhibition project, and he was doing, again, all this research in Spanish, it was beautiful, was trying to solve this question of shark population decline. And so he wanted to know, why was the population going down? His original theory was overfishing. Of course, that is a variable. What he learned was microplastics is another one of those issues that's a contributing factor to something that he doesn't want to see happen, which is sharks going extinct. And so after his research into the issue, after he conveyed his finding to his class, what was his action orientation? We're going to become a zero plastic household. And this was years ago, man. And to this day, Jacob, we at all times of the shopping experience, and I don't know if you have kids or not, but when you're in a grocery store with 2 kids, like that's a balancing act.
That can be daunting.
But to this day, he looks for glass and or some type of recyclable material as opposed to plastics because of his exhibition project. And now he's scheming up how to rewild the front yard of my house because there's too much grass in his opinion. Why is that a problem? When it rains here in the DC area, all that runoff comes off the front yard, all that runoff hits the road, all those toxins go into the water system. I mean, this is how IB kids think. Right. And he literally researched native plants and different things that we can plant in the front yard to prevent that runoff. Right. And build an ecosystem, if you will, in the front yard. And again, back to your question, that's just a perfect example of how kids feel when they're engaged in their learning, and they have these phenomenal educators that know how to support that learning how to learn. And that's carried with them almost 7 years later.
That's wonderful. This is so interesting because I was just talking to some other colleagues about how we think about eco-friendly, I guess, our yards and how we build houses. So this week is a week of connectivity in conversation. So I appreciate that. But and that's wonderful for your son. I know he has a bright future ahead of him, but he's definitely going to be a change maker.
He will. Yeah. No, he researched the list. I still have the list, and I'll probably frame it. And I actually have a buddy who's a landscape architect, and showed him the list. And I was like, hey, here's what my son is thinking. And he was just like, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
You need to go here with this one and this tree here to really make this work. But to his credit, he researched it, he's planned it out, and I'm going to be forced to execute at some point.
So let's role play for a bit, if you don't mind. Just the bit. I'm a parent sitting down with you. I don't know much about IB, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
What would you say to me as a parent who might be interested in IB for their child?
Well, first off, I would say every family should research the IB, number one, right? Because there is this perception that it's for the kiddos that are academically oriented, that are quote unquote gifted and or talented. And I would like to undermine that narrative right now to all your listeners. Every kid can be successful in the IB. And then two, it's really just, is that kiddo wanting to leverage their schooling in a way that is, again, this kind of agency-oriented manner of teaching and learning? I think that's where a lot of the disorientation happens for kids that fall into the diploma program specifically, right? And what I mean by that is they've had a traditional educational model.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really appreciate is, like, you have all these other great nonprofits right now in the ed reform space that are even pushing that narrative and calling it an industrial model, right? An industrial model of teaching and learning.
Oh, wow.
Which I would agree with when you look at the history of education in the United States and how we have this very rote, somewhat at times like teacher-directed model of teaching and learning, right? When you have that experience from kindergarten all the way through 10th grade, and then you show up in 11th grade, and I'm like, nah, I don't want the right answer. I want you to know how to research. I want you to know how to stand up and communicate your findings. And then I want you to not only be able to cite those research points, but persuade me to the point of where you want to go with this problem. It's just a completely different model. And I got to experience that shift myself. I'm a proud product of Louisiana schools. I'm a proud alum of Louisiana State University.
LSU.
I bleed purple and gold, Jacob. I watch every LSU football game. I watch my Lady Tigers, love my alma mater. I transferred to Trinity College Dublin just because of my Irish ancestry, roots, right? Last name Kelty, traced our family back to County Cork, transferred over, and I had this exceptional experience of going to just a very history university that, happens to be in Dublin. One of my starkest memories of transitioning to an inquiry-based model of schooling, which Trinity is I went up to my professor, and in the US, that's what you do, right? That's how you get ahead, is you go, you're like, hey, what else do I need to learn and memorize, right? Particularly in the track I was in, which was a pre-med track, where we were graded on the bell curve. You had to be in the top 10% to get your head, right? And this professor looked me dead in the eye without even hesitating. He said, why do you Americans always want everything handed to you? And I remember just being like, what? And now, what he was saying to me is, you don't know how to go and find these answers yourself. And now when I look at like the product of the schooling, right, that I experienced, that was the model. It was a sit and get and memorize model. And the IB is a very different model of, no, we're going to teach you how to research this. And then you're going to cite it, and then you're going to come up with that content. And I wish I could go back to that professor and say, that changed how I saw teaching and learning and still influences me 25 years into the game of education reform across the US. Because he's right. We need a new vision for schooling in the US. And we need one that's more engaging and more empowering for students. And I would say an inquiry-based teaching and learning model is that model that we need to be looking at.
Well, Trinity is definitely a wonderful school, downtown Dublin.
Yeah.
So wonderful. Also, just quick fact, I'm a Amazing Race buff. And Trinity was also on the Amazing Race. It was one of the stops.
Was it really? Oh, it's beautiful campus, right?
Yeah, and actually that was prior to my visit to Dublin, so I was really excited to go to campus.
Yeah.
Due to the Amazing Race in part. So what does future-ready global citizen look like, or citizenship look like for you? And let's think about the year 2035. So thinking about the students you're preparing now, what does it mean to be future-ready in the future?
You know, one of the other things that I'm really proud of the organization is for how it embraced AI early in the game.
Mm-hmm.
We were, I would say, upfront on this issue of saying this is a tool, and we should be encouraging students to not only learn the tool, but think about the ethics of the tool, right? The philosophy of the tool, and how it can be applied in ways that are ethical, right? And so when I think 2035, and, you know, I see that at this point, we have not embraced AI, right? In a lot of K-12 systems.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's going to shift. I think much like we had a reaction to calculators, right? I think eventually we're going to have that mindset of how are we empowering kiddos to know this technology, leverage this technology in a way that can be beneficial. And, you know, I still go back to, you know, this notion of what the IB is premised on. It's called the learner profile. And it's these traits that all IB schools uphold. And it's, are you a risk taker? Are you compassionate? Are you a thinker? And I think outside of just having memorized skills, which of course there's a place for, right? But it's really in our learner profile. It's how you take these schools and apply them to make a better world. And so I'm an optimist, Jacob. I know when like we talk about 2035, you can have like one side of being like, you know, science fiction, transhuman, like we're going to be losing our human identity. I don't think that's the case. I think in 2035, we're going to just be using another technological tool and hopefully making this world a better place for everyone who inhabits it.
Yeah, and I think as long as we have humans, we're still going to be searching for what it means to be human and humanity. So even with AI, it takes us back to empathy, critical thinking, and social responsibility, as you mentioned earlier.
Right.
So it's not just AI for the purpose of AI. And again, for inquiry, how do you continue to solve problems to make the world better? So we're speaking with Robert Kelty, who is the director or head of outreach, government relations, and development at International Baccalaureate. Robert, what can the EdUp Accelerated Excellence community look for in the future out of the work of IB or out of your own office, and how might the community engage with you?
Well, you know, there's a couple pilots that I should highlight. We have some fantastic colleagues that are working on this concept of IB for all. So more students can have exposure to the rigors of the IB, either earlier in their learning experience and or in their high school experience, so they can, you know, really be college ready and career ready. We have another pilot in Louisiana And we've never done this before. And this was to help schools meet the letter of the law as the state changed its accountability formula to where schools could improve their score or their grade, if you will, by providing more advanced courses to students. And for the first time, the IB, and it's a very small pilot, right, because we're learning from it, but allowing schools to actually teach IB courses when they're in candidacy. Because as you probably know, like becoming an IB World School is not easy. Like it takes between a year to 2 years to become authorized as an IB World School. And now what we're doing is saying we're going to hold those standards, because that is what makes the IB special, is this internationally recognized credential that you get that shows colleges that, you know, you are ready for the rigors of college in your career. But what we're saying for this limited pilot is, can we support schools in teaching IB courses while they're in candidacy?
Right.
And that way we're having students exposed to this type of teaching and learning earlier. And I'm really excited about that, because our vision now as an organization is to reach more students, 5 million by 2032. We want more students around the world to have access to this type of model of teaching and learning, to feel like they're college and career ready, and that they can go out there and be a positive change for good. So I would say keep watching us, because we're gonna keep pushing and keep innovating, because that's again in the DNA of the IB.
So I like this IB for all. So there's an opportunity if you're interested. How can districts and schools and school leaders and parents contact you or reach out to you? We're going to put some notes in. We'll put information in the show notes. But if you could on air provide a contact, that will be helpful as well.
Absolutely. I'm happy to direct any questions to the appropriate stakeholder within the organization. You can just email me directly, robert.kelty, Kelty @ibo.org, and I'd be happy to support any questions that come our way.
So Robert, thank you for this opportunity to learn with and from you in our first of the two-part series, spotlighting the work of IB here at EdUp Accelerated Excellence.
Jacob, it's been an honor to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
A special thanks to our research assistant, Emily Bloom, a recent graduate of Fordham University's Mental Health Counseling Program. Congratulations, Emily! And we want to hear from you. If you have feedback on this or other episodes, or would like to nominate a guest, contact us online at edupxe.com. That's edupxe.com.
Thank you for engaging with EdUp Accelerated Excellence, a member of the EdUp Experience Network of educational podcasts. You can find this and other episodes on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Radio, and other outlets where you listen to your favorite podcasts. If you like this episode, don't forget to follow us and share within your network. To leave a comment or suggest a guest, contact us online at edupxe.com.